Hello everybody and welcome back to the Dovetail box series. In this video, we've got a pretty quick one for you today because we're going to be shaping the finger pull. I don't know why I'm holding up that component, we're going to be doing it on here. Let's get going. Right, so the finger pull. To be honest, this stage is completely up to you. If you'd prefer to put a handle on top in order to pull the lid off vertically, or if you want to put a little handle on the front so you can sort of lift the lid off, then it's up to you. For me, I'm going to shape a little bit out the front here so that you can put your finger in there and then lift the lid off from the front. Ooh. And then open the box. For me, I would prefer that rather than having something stick out the box from the front or the top and potentially provide a weak point that may break. By having something that shapes into the front means that it is just an integral part of the box and should last very long. So as with anything in woodworking, there are many ways in order to do a single task, and this is no exception to it. This is just a few of the tools that I have that will be able to achieve exactly the same result, albeit some being slightly easier than others. First one is obviously a gouge. You could clamp the box down securely and then carefully gouge out the finger pull, making sure to work with the grain from both directions, and this will give you a pretty good result. However, with this, you've got to be pretty careful that you don't dig too deep, and it may potentially give you a sort of like weird scallops all over the place if you're working with one with a slightly smaller radius / diameter than this. So that's one option. The other option is a Spokeshave. You could do that, once again, working with the grain so that you don't cause any tear out on the front edge. Working through to halfway will stop that from happening. Just make sure that the Spokeshave you have has a curved bottom on it that allows you to go in and scoop out that material. And then the third and final option is by using a rasp of some kind. This is a microplane rasp. They last a pretty long time and they give a reasonable finish as well. This is actually the coarse cutting microplane rasp, and it'll be fine for this job. And the nice thing about rasps is you don't have to worry too much about grain direction. I can go across like this. It's going to give somewhat of a coarse finish, but then I can clean that up with sandpaper afterwards. So the first thing to decide is which face I actually want to put that finger pull on, and you can be strategic about this. You can work out which one has the nicest sort of grain going on, and in this instance it's this side, and then you can look at the dovetails and work out, does this one have more gaps than this side? Which one do I want to be more visible to everyone looking at it? So pick the side that looks nicest in terms of gaps, grain direction, and other variables that may be happening with this. I'm going to go for this side, I reckon. I lie, I'm going to go for this side. So we'll just quickly get it marked out. So halfway on there. And to create the radius, I mean, I could try and match the radius of this rasp that I've got, but I'll be able to shape it somewhat anyway. So I'm going to look for something to trace around. And to be honest, I reckon this pot of John West tuna is going to be pretty bang on for this. So just make sure your pencil is sharp when you do this because you want a nice precise line to work to. That'd be nice. We'll go for that. I'll just transfer those lines to the top edge, line up my trusty template with those lines again. And now into the vise. And then this microplane has a little handle to, I say little, quite a big handle to snap into. I prefer having these actually cutting on the pull stroke. I tend to get a bit more control from that. So when I pull it down like this, that's when it's going to be cutting, and that will cut down on vibration, because if you're pushing up, it's going to slightly lift this box off the workbench and it might sort of cause it to judder a bit, whereas if you're cutting down, it's going to pull it into the workbench and keep it firmly planted. So for the time being, it's just going to be coarse material removal from this area, and I'll get it as close to the lines as I dare before then taking the final bit of cleanup and keeping those lines nice and crisp. So as I'm doing this, I'm looking to approach both of these lines on the front at a similar rate and making sure that I'm not rocking the rasp forwards and backwards while doing so. By keeping it at a perfect 45 and approaching the lines at a similar rate, it gives me a nice flat surface in there to reference the rasp on, and also when it comes to sanding it, I'll be able to reference the sanding block on that perfectly flat 45-degree face. I say perfectly flat, it's obviously in a concave surface, but it will still rest flat in the tilt, I suppose. I don't know what terms to use here. All right, so that's all the rough shaping done on the finger pull, and there is a tiny little pencil line left around the outside of that entire cut, so I can see that I am not over the line just yet, and I can sand back to it and make sure that I'm keeping that consistent curve. If you get rid of the line, you're in no man's land by that point, and you have no idea where to take the material from and how to keep it consistent across that entire radius. So leaving just a little smidge of that pencil line there will really help. So now it's time to start cleaning up this surface, and I've got a bench dog. Any other round object will do, as long as it's a small enough radius to get within that curve. And I am going to wrap this in 80 grit, which is a very, very coarse sandpaper, but we're not going to be scrubbing away at this trying to clean up that surface. It's going to be delicate, controlled passes across the length of it, making sure not to go outside of the pencil lines that I've drawn on there, and 80 grit will get rid of the scratch marks left by this relatively quickly. Obviously you could do the same with 120 grit, it's just going to take a bit longer. However, by doing it with 80 grit, it will get the job done quicker, it's less likely to tip because you're doing it in less passes, and yeah, I should get a better result from it once I start working through the grades. So I'm going to put the dog on there and then rock it until I feel it sort of lock onto that 45 degrees, which is about there, and then careful passes. And basically what I'm looking to do here is change all of these vertical scratches into horizontal scratches. As soon as I've done that, that's where I know I've gone far enough with the 80 grit and I can progress to the next one. The next grade, 120. So I've sanded this up to about 180 grit, and I am going to take it up to 240, but I'll do that once the entire box is finished, and then I can sand the entire thing consistently. As with anything else in it, if you sand it to the final grit now, it's just going to get grubby between now and actually finishing the box, and you'll just have to re-sand everything. So I'm going to leave it at 180 grit in this little finger pull, and then once it comes to sanding, we'll just buzz over that with 240 grit, a couple of passes, gets rid of any of the grubby marks there, keeps it nice and clean, and then the finish afterwards will be very nice. It's a pretty quick step this, but you do need to be very careful. Just remember that this is for removing the bulk of the material. Sandpaper is not for shaping, it is for the final finishing and smoothing and removing the marks left over by this. Don't start scrubbing away that material with the sandpaper, because invariably you will just end up rocking it somewhat and you'll get rid of that nice corner that we've been left with on the front of the box. Controlled sweeps with this thing will give you the best result, and make sure that every pass you do with it is deliberate. You want to be keeping an eye on it in order to get the overall crisp look of the finger pull. So you're now ready to move on to the next lesson, which you can do so by clicking the link below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel by pressing the big round button to the left hand side of the video. I will see you in the next one.